Hello and welcome to Craft with Sarah and day 19 of the Halloween Craft Countdown, where I'm sharing 20 Halloween-themed Cricut projects in 20 days. 10 of the projects are designed by me and 10 are guest designer projects from some of my crafting friends. This is the last project in this year's countdown that I've designed, and it's one of the easiest to make. The spooky 3D tree is cut from craftboard to make it super sturdy. It comes with little bat hanging decorations to hang down from the cutouts in the branches, or you can hide the cutouts to make a version without the bats. If you cut the trees at an even smaller size than this, they would look amazing next to Lucy Foxworth's haunted house from day 2 of the countdown. The files for this project are free for the next 24 hours. Here's how to download them. Register a free ticket for the Halloween Craft Countdown at craftwithsarah.com/HCC23. If you're already registered, check for an email from me with subject line Halloween Craft Countdown ticket information, or any of the other emails from me that you've been sent throughout the countdown. Can't find them? Check your junk or spam box to see if they've gone there by mistake. These emails contain the link to view the countdown projects and download today's files. Scroll down this page to find today's project. Click the button to start the files automatically downloading to your computer or mobile device. Each download is only available for free for 24 hours after it goes live. If you've missed some, check out the Instant Access Bundle at craftwithsarah.com/HCC23 bundle, which gives immediate and ongoing access to all of the files from the Halloween Craft Countdown, plus loads of extra bonus designs. All downloads come in zip folders. You will need to unzip them before you can upload the files into Cricut Design Space. Once you've downloaded and unzipped the folder, it's time to get the SVG file into Cricut Design Space. Open up Design Space and start a new project, and then go into Upload over on the left, and then Upload Image. You can then either click Browse to find a file on your computer, or drag and drop them in. Make sure you choose the unzipped version of the folder, and then the file to choose is the one which starts SVG in the file name. Click and drag that in. And this is what it looks like. So we've got our 4 shapes of the tree and then all the little bats underneath. And press upload. So I'll click that one and then add to canvas. And it's going to load in pretty big. But don't worry, that's just because we've got everything next to each other. It will still cut from your regular 12 by 12 inch craft board, which is what we're going to be using for this rather than cardstock. If you've got it, craft board will work so much better because it is stronger than cardstock. And the reason I've got 4 trees is that a lot of the Cricut craft board is only pretty on one side and the back side is just kind of like a dull brown colour. So we're going to be sticking the trees back to back so that they're pretty on both sides, and also that gives it additional stability too. If I zoom out a little, you can see what we've got. There are the 4 trees and then all of the bats underneath. And the reason that there are so many bats is that we'll be sticking them together to make them have a 3D effect as well. Now by default, if I click on one of these trees, you see it's 11.417 inches wide and 11.394 inches tall. And that's the size that the tree will cut out at. This is actually quite a nice size for the tree. I wouldn't recommend going an awful lot smaller. If you do want to make it smaller, here's the best way to do that. Click on the design and then ungroup the layers by pressing the Ungroup button at the top of the Layers panel. We've still got everything selected, and go to Align and then Center. And that's going to put everything exactly on top of the other. So now you know that all those trees are perfectly aligned. So we can group it again. I'll zoom in so it's easy to see. And then if I wanted to, for example, make a 10 by 10 inch tree, I can type 10 inches into the width and press enter. And everything changes in proportion, so I know everything is still going to line up exactly. And don't worry that it now looks a little bit weird on the screen. That doesn't matter. Your Cricut still knows that they're all completely different shapes. Now I've got my bats and my tree on a different colour, but if you wanted to cut them from the same colour, go over to Colour Sync on the top right, and then close that up. And then let's say I wanted to do it all from grey. You can just click and drag the brown onto the grey and let go with your mouse, and then it will all change to the same colour. But I'm going to undo that and just make this big again. There we go. And then click on Make It. There's nothing else that needs doing for this design. It's super easy. There are lots of bats, and if you want to, you can change the paper size in here. It's gonna just about, well, I think I could fit those. They are connected though. Maybe not. I was wondering if I'd be able to fit it on if I did some clever rotating, but I think they're just about the wrong size. So that's not quite going to work. Maybe I'll go back to 12 by 12. There we go. Okay. And then I've also got my trees here, so I'll need 4 sheets of this. And you can see it's almost going right to the very edge. As I said, I'm using Craftboard, which I cut on the Craftboard setting, which is just when you're choosing your materials, go into Browse All Materials, and you can choose Craftboard. And you don't need a special blade in your machine or anything like that. It will cut with your regular cutting blade in your Cricut Explore Maker. Explore Maker, that's not a thing. In your Cricut Explore Air 2 or 3, or your Cricut Maker or Maker 3. There we go. All right, so go ahead and get all of this cut out, and then we'll see how to stick it all together. Here are 2 of my tree shapes cut out from Craftboard, and this is why we cut 4 of them, because on the back of the card, it's this kind of dull brown colour, and I want my whole tree to be this shiny metallic green from the Craftboard. So what I need to do is glue the 2 matching bits together, and when you're gluing them together, make sure that you match up the holes in the slits. So this one, the slit is on the bottom, it's also on the bottom on this one, and that's how I know that these 2 go back to back. So I'll glue these together, and I'm using my trusty Collel glue that I always use, but the only downside with this particular glue, which is normally, of course, an upside, is that it does dry really quickly. And there's a lot of tree to put it on, so I'm going to have to work really, really quickly to make sure that the bits I've put on first don't dry before I get to the end. Try and get the glue all the way into the tips of the branches, because we don't want the 2 bits of Craftboard coming apart once it's stuck together. Right, now I can stick this one on top. And the important bit to line up is the slit in the middle. It doesn't matter if the rest of it ends up a little bit off, but that slit needs to be perfectly aligned, otherwise your tree might not slot together properly. It can be a bit fiddly because there's lots of little narrow bits and it's quite big. Okay, there we go. So that's all lined up very nicely. I just need to wait for that glue to dry. And while that's drying, I'll just show you the other half of the tree, which I've already added the bats to. There are several different ways you can add the bats. It's designed to be done with string, either kind of a pale coloured string or a dark colour, or even you can get kind of invisible string, and that would look the best. However, I am not very good at tying knots, and I was really struggling using string. It took me about 30 minutes just to tie one of these bats on, and there are 12, I think, in total, so that was going to take me forever. So I tried to find an alternative in my craft room, and I settled on using these very thin strips of metal. It's bendy wire. Wire is a better description than metal, I guess. Kind of florist wire, so it's really thin and bendy. It can still be cut with a pair of scissors. And I found that much easier because instead of tying knots, as you'll see in a minute, I could just twist the ends of the wire together. And okay, it's not as beautiful as using the see-through string, because you can still see my wire. It might look a bit better if it was maybe black wire or a dark colour. But using it in this way and adding the wire instead of string made the project much more accessible for me to be able to make it. So if you're like me and you struggle with tying teeny tiny little knots, then using something like thin wire is a great alternative. And actually what I kind of like is because it's heavier than string, the bats stay in position really well and they hang down nicely because of the weight of the wire. So it does have that benefit to it too. In total, there are 12 bats, and each bat is made up of 3 little bits of cardstock. And that's because we've got the main bat in the middle, which has the hole in the wing, and then it has one on the front and one on the back that you can fold the wings up to get a 3D effect. You can either put the bats on when it's flat like this, or we can try and do it when it's stood up. Let's give that a little try. I'm just going to put the lid back on my glue before I forget. Okay, this is dry enough. It seems to be. Slotting the tree together is really easy. You just stand it up so that I've got the one with the slit in the top in my left hand here. And then this is the one with the slit in the bottom. And it just goes over, so then the slits align. And it forms this cross shape, and that is our tree all stood up. It's kind of hard to see on this angle, so if I turn it, it's gonna, hopefully you can kind of see how that's working. And I've got my bats all hung up in the little gaps. I still need to add the bats to that first tree. It might be easier to see with this one, which I cut at about half the size, just so you can see a little better how that's looking. This one's done from red craft board, mirror board as well. And this one I decided that it would be too hard to add the bats to it this small. So actually before I cut it out in Design Space, I used the contour tool to get rid of all the little circles in the branches. So this one can just be a little standalone tree, and it looks really cute. All right, so adding the other bats. I'm trying to decide if I want to do it stood up now that I can stand my tree up, and I've not quite got it all the way down. There we go. Or if I want to lie it down so it's easier for you to see. I think I'll do it so it's easier for me to make. So sorry about that. Okay, so I've got my very thin wire. I'm going to cut it into 3 because you don't need a lot for each bat. And then there are 3 large bats and 3 small bats for each of the side of the tree. So I've got 3 of each left. I'll start with one of the larger ones, which has got the hole in the wing. And to start with, I'll just thread my wire through and then bend it in half. Let's move that. Get it roughly into so it's halfway down, and then bend the wire upwards and push it tight. So if you're using string, you could just tie it at the top or tie it onto the wing. It's up to you. I found this way is a little bit easier. And then I can find one of the holes on my tree. I'll choose this one here on this branch. This is so big, it's hard to see. And then with one, let's open these up. Come on. One of the bits of wire, I'm going to poke it through one of the holes. And then just check I'm happy with where that's hanging. And then just twist the ends of the wire together. So I'm just wrapping them around each other. Twisty, twisty, twisting. And that's going to hold it so it's not going to fall off. But I've got, you can hopefully see, quite a bit of ugly wire there now. So what I'm also going to do is just wrap it around the tree branch so that it's a little bit more neater. And then if I can just tilt that around so you can see. So it's now wrapped around the tree branch. It's got my bat on there really securely and so much easier than tying little knots. And then to add to the 3D effect, take one of the bats without the holes. Make sure you match up the shapes. So this is one of the bigger ones. And just gently fold up the wings like that. Add a bit of glue or double-sided tape onto the back. Don't put any over where you folded the wings up, just in the middle of the body. You can kind of see that. And then I'm going to glue that into the middle of the bat. And this might fall off a bit now that I'm doing it already stood up, so you might need to take it apart and just lie it down to add on the bats. Seems to be holding so far. And then do the same for another bat, so another one of the ones without any holes in. And I'm going to add that onto the other side, just to make this really dimensional. There we go. So then I would just go and do exactly the same to all of the holes on the tree until all of my bats are hanging up. And then that would be my spooky 3D Halloween tree all finished. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to make 3D trees from Craftboard. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for loads more Cricut crafts and Halloween fun. I hope to see you tomorrow for the final day of the Halloween craft countdown. Don't forget the link to get the cut files for today's project is craftwithsarah.com/HCC23, but they're only free to download for 24 hours after this video goes live. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!